So now moving on to question number 10, let us read it first. Changes to vegetation cover and other human activities influence carbon and nitrogen levels in soil. Though how deep these effects extend is unclear, hypothesizing that differences in land use lead to differences in carbon and nitrogen levels that are not restricted to the topsoil layer, that is between 0 to 30 cm deep, Chukwuebuka Okolo and colleagues sampled soils across multiple land use types, example grazing land, cropland, forest, within each of several Ethiopian locations. They found though, this is important, they found though that across land use types, carbon and nitrogen decreased to comparably low levels beyond depths of 30 cm. So which choice best describes the overall structure of the text? Is it A? It describes a phenomena that scientists do not fully understand, explains a research team's hypothesis about the phenomena, and then describes a finding that led the team to refine the hypothesis. Then B. It introduces an unresolved scientific question, presents a research team's hypothesis pertaining to that question, and then describes an observation made by the team that conflicts with that hypothesis. C. It discusses a process that scientists are somewhat unclear about, introduces competing hypotheses about that process, and then explains how a research team concluded that one of those hypotheses are likely correct. Or D. It explains a hypothesis that has been the subject of scientific debate, discusses how a research team tested that hypothesis, and then presents data the team collected that validate the hypothesis. So you can see that in the first part, changes to vegetation cover and other human activities influence carbon and nitrogen level. That part is said. And then hypothesizing that differences in land use. So if there is any difference in land use, that leads to differences in carbon and nitrogen levels that are not restricted to the topsoil layer, that is between 0 to 30 cm deep. But when they tested, they found though. So this is the something which they expected to find, but they found something else. So that is the key hint for you. So which do you think is the answer? So if you said B, congratulations, that's the best answer because it most accurately describes the overall structure of the text. The text begins by explaining that human activities influence carbon and nitrogen levels in soil, but how deeply these effects are seen in the soil remains an unresolved question. Next, the text summarizes Okolo and colleagues' hypothesis regarding this question, which is that the different effects on carbon and nitrogen levels associated with different types of land use would also be observed below the topsoil layer, and then briefly explains the methods they used to test this hypothesis. Finally, the text states that the researchers found that at depths below the topsoil layer, in fact, carbon and nitrogen decreased to similarly low levels across all land use, a finding that conflicts with the team's hypothesis presented earlier in the text. Thus, the text introduces an unresolved scientific question and presents a research team's hypothesis pertaining to that question, and then describes an observation that the team made that conflicted with their hypothesis. So this is the best way. It's an unresolved scientific question and there is an hypothesis, but then what they found after researching was conflicting. And A is incorrect because although the text introduces a phenomena, that is the fact that human activities influence carbon and nitrogen levels in the soil, that isn't fully understood by scientists and explains a research team's hypothesis about the phenomena, the text does not describe how the team refined. So refine is mentioned, but it's not refining. Nothing about refining is there. How the team refined the hypothesis when a research finding contradicted it. In fact, what they found was contradicting, not refining. And C is incorrect because the text doesn't discuss a process at all. Rather, it poses an unsolved scientific question and presents a hypothesis that Okolo and colleagues tested to answer that question. Moreover, the text only describes one hypothesis. It doesn't mention any competing hypothesis, nor does it suggest that Okolo's team was able to determine which hypothesis was correct. So there was no competing hypothesis and all those things at all. Then D is incorrect because the text doesn't begin by presenting a hypothesis that is under scientific debate. It's not about a scientific debate, it's just unclear. it presents a question that scientists have been unable to answer and then introduces a hypothesis formulated by Okolo and colleagues. While the text does explain how Okolo's team tested their hypothesis, the text goes on to say that their data conflicted with their hypothesis, not that the data validated or supported their hypothesis. So it didn't validate, they found something contradictory, because that's why they found, though it says. That means they found something else, not what they expected according to their hypothesis. So I hope.